All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining DataCon LA 2020. Welcome to the Data for Good track. And soon we'll be listening to Using Data to Empower Youth Program Participants at Changeist, sessions with Manajay Mamuzadeh. And I'm Courtney Fowler, your host, and our co-host today is Navina Parasa. We'll be moderating a chat with a Q&A for you during this session. Today, again, we have our guest, Manajay Mamuzadeh, and she'll be talking to us about using data to empower youth program participants at Changeist. A short bio for Manajay. She is currently a PhD candidate with passion and drive in developmental psychology and youth work. She supports youth institutions in better serving the community by using evaluation to center marginalized voices. Manajay's specialty is empowerment programming, where young people learn about social justice, develop skills to create social political change. She also studies the developmental impacts of social change making, self-love and self-care for women and people of color, and positive body image. Without further ado, I'll hand this over to the speaker. Thanks for being here again, Manajay Mamuzadeh.
Thank you so much. Wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. Let me go ahead and start this presentation. Bear with me just a moment to make sure that I get this right. Okay, does that look good? Great. Alrighty, well, thank you all for joining today. I'm just really happy to see a bunch of folks who are here and excited about talking about data with youth and how we can use data and our data technologies to do good in the world, especially when we're working in youth serving institutions. So, my name is Manajay Mamuzadeh. It's a long one, I know, but pronouns are she, her. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Changeist. I have been at Changeist for about 6 years now, since we were a very baby program. And we're a youth empowerment program that's based in California. So we currently have 2 sites, one based in Los Angeles and one based in Stockton, California, which is our new site that we're very excited about. So as mentioned, I'm a doctoral candidate in developmental psychology and applied research and evaluation. And so what I'll be talking about today is really the intersection and weaving of those 2 disciplines, and trying to understand what data looks like in a context where we are fostering positive youth development. All right, so I want to start with first talking a little bit about the ethical and moral issues surrounding data, especially data in the education system and schoolhouse adjacent spaces, like out of school time and after school programming. It's complicated territory, that's for sure. If you ask any teacher, any after school program worker, even really any child in elementary, middle, or high school, and you ask them about data and how it's used, you'll get a lot of complicated thoughts and feelings, especially around the way that we use standardized testing and the way that our system has taken to collecting data in order to ensure that students are academically on track. The reason that there is so much emotion and so much just complication around this really comes from the fact that data is a tool created by humans, right? Which has its own set of flaws, its own set of results that come from the way that we use our data. And so you'll often find that teachers or after school program workers are frustrated by the way that data is treated within their professional space. And so at Changeist, we're trying to shift a little bit of the way that we think about that. I had sent out a survey question to all of you. Thank you so much for responding to it. And the question was, does anyone talk about the ethics of data where you're working, right? I was very happy to see that almost half of us said yes, there is some conversation happening around the implications of the data that we collect. Other folks, not so much, or we're kind of like, what implications are we talking about? Data collection is a tool created by humans, like every other tool that humans created, right? And so this tool that we use can serve to empower or oppress people, just like all of the other tools that we have within our society. And so I wanted to just set the stage first to talk a little bit about some background on thinking about the ethics of data collection. And I'm starting with a few really great resources here that have helped me develop my understanding of what it means to use data in an empowering sense. These are two really great books that you can see here on screen, one by Kathy O'Neill and one by Sophia Ujoma Noble. Both of these talk about the different ways that our society collects data and information about people and then uses data to predetermine what kind of opportunities we have in life, right? So one just very common example is thinking about loan rates, right? And the way that often marginalized and poor communities, their information is taken into these hidden algorithms, and the algorithm spits out some kind of results for what services may be provided to them. And often these serve to just reproduce inequality in our systems. And I think that something similar can be said sometimes for the way that we use data in youth work as well. I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to the Feminist Data Manifest No, which is developed by a collective of feminist scientists who have put some really wonderful and critical thought into the way that we interact with data, the way that we collect data. And so the Feminist Data Manifest No is also a website that I've included a link to in the Whova article recommendation thing. So please go ahead and take a look at that as well. But I thought that a good way to kind of talk a little bit about the implications ethically of data use would be two big things that are happening in LA right now. So some of you may have heard about some of these initiatives going on. For those of us who have the privilege of voting currently, there's been a lot going on about Proposition 25. And I think I'll start there just to kind of provide some background. So Proposition 25 is a measure on the California state ballot currently that aims to eradicate the cash bail system. We know that the cash bail system disproportionately affects those who are already marginalized. And so it seems really great, right? Like, let's not use a cash bail system anymore and just determine the confine or the relationship between bail and our community members based on data instead. Sounds fantastic, but as many people have been pretty quick to point out, these algorithms often serve to reproduce the same inequalities and racism that we see, right? So particularly when the people, the people don't get to know what variables are weighted within these proprietary algorithms, it could just end up reusing data that says like Black and brown people, poor people, young people are those who are the highest risk for not showing up to their court cases. You know, I can't say whether that's true or not, but therefore, end up not allowing bail for those people as well. And so I'm not necessarily advocating that, you vote no or yes on Prop 25, but I did just want to mention this as something really interesting that's happening within our state in terms of will we allow data to be used for this very important civil and human rights issue, right? And then I wanted to give a shout out to the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. They are a great organization that actually a lot of our Changeist youth work with. They are doing some really good work around stopping the Los Angeles Police Department from using data for predictive policing, right? So often when these algorithms are built, pre-existing data goes in and it spits out more information, right, to kind of direct where where we should be making decisions. But when the data is already biased to begin with, right, the algorithm is just going to spit out more bias. So all of that to say, I think there is a lot of work that can be done around the way that we are collectively using data in order to make a better world. And I'm going to talk more about how we're trying to do that with our work at Changeist. So we have collectively decided as an organization that our youth participants who come to Changeist are our most important stakeholders. When I say youth participants, I mean middle schoolers and high schoolers, often from disenfranchised communities. Usually the youth that get the least opportunities, right, within the state and our world more broadly. And so we've made a very inherently political decision that the perspectives, voices, and needs of the youth that we serve are the most important. And we're going to center that, right, in all of the ways that we collect data. So let's talk a little bit more about what that means. There were a few really big steps that we had to take as an organization to get to a place where we can really work with youth as the center of our data work. The first is that we really had to intentionally develop a culture of accountability and pride in meeting youth needs. I think oftentimes evaluation and data work can be very, very scary for people. It can often be used as like a worrisome tool, right? Where our educators fear something bad happening to them because of what the data says. And we've worked really hard over the past 6 years at Changeist to instead say, we have a sense of pride and honor in serving youth in the way that we promise, and our data will help us to uphold that, right? So really shifting the narrative around, ooh, data is this scary thing, and rather my honor lies in what the data says and what our youth say. And I, as a member of this community, will do whatever it takes to really center their needs. So that's one. It kind of builds into the rest of these. I would say the second most important piece is emphasizing collective learning, right? And reframing from punitive use of data. So we, as a team, and when I say as a team, I mean both the executive officers of our program, but also our line staff, right? I should say that we work with a team of 30 AmeriCorps members who are really the backbone of our programming, and they are generally young people that have either just finished school or are taking a break from school and decide that they want to do service work in the community. So we had a conversation with them and said, you know what, we will never use the data that we get to make anything bad happen to you, to, you know, put you on a performance management plan. This is all collectively, we're using this information to learn and to hold one another accountable. The third thing that we do really differently, and we'll kind of get to this as we move into the actual surveys, is we center youth's internal experiences rather than what they produce, right? So it's very easy to collect data on attendance, to collect data on youth's grades, what their parents say about them, what kind of projects youth put together, right, at the end. This focus on what are they doing and what are they contributing to the world. We have instead decided that we're going to center the way that youth feel, experience our space, and grow within our space. And so what that has meant for us is really tailoring the data that we collect to be about their internal life, their experiences, and how they're feeling about the work that they're doing. And finally, you know, nothing about us without us. That's one of our youth's favorite little chants. We use our data in service to the youth about whom it was collected. So that's one thing. So when we collect information, it is for the purpose of bettering their experience. And when we learn about how we have to change our programming, we always engage the youth themselves in those change-making processes. So I am now going to get into the actual technique that we've used that aligns with the values and perspectives that we're holding around youth empowerment. And I will say, I am a student of a professor named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a very long, beautiful name, but you may have heard of his work around flow. So he is one of the foremost researchers on flow as a state of experience, like when you're in the zone and something is really just, you're challenged, but you lose yourself in it, you're gaining skills and it's meaningful, right? Those incredible experiences that we have where we're doing work and we lose ourselves. My professor and mentor developed this style of survey method in order to be able to capture those experiences. And so I decided, let's use this in a youth program instead of regular research. So here we are. Let me tell you a little bit about why this really fits in. For young people, context is so important to our lives. We often think about youth development as something that sort of just naturally unfolds, but the reality of what the research tells us is that people really drive their own growth. People choose what sort of environments to interact with and how they want to interact with those. You know, not to say that there are many contextual factors that can limit one's choices. That is very real. However, you know, we sometimes forget that young people, they have agency in how they choose to grow over time. Secondly, when it comes to youth programming, we know that the quality of programming is very important, but also the way that young people engage in that programming, right? So you can't just show up and zone out the whole time. People have to engage in a meaningful way in order to garner the benefits. And finally, this is kind of an interesting one, youth's perceptions of quality in their programming may be more indicative than staff perceptions, right? So think about like when you've had a conflict with a parent as a child and maybe you misunderstood what their intention was, but the way that they made you feel and the way that you experienced it is what really impacts your development, right? So the same is true with youth in school and in program contexts. So ESM, the experience sampling method, fits really well with this literature and what we know about good youth development. This is a tool for examining first-person experience about what's happening in someone's life in the moment. So it's not a reflective survey. It's the type of survey that says, what are you doing right now and how do you feel about it? So you can collect quantitative or qualitative data using this method, or both. We prefer both. It's always helpful to have multiple sources of data, as you well know. But what's really critical is that you're studying what's happening inside and outside for the person. So you're asking questions about their cognitive, emotional, and behavioral experiences. Things like, what are you thinking about right now? How safe do you feel? How engaged are you in what's going on in your moment right now? And at the same time, characteristics of the context. So what are you doing? Who are you with? Where are you? And this information, when we have both pieces collected at the same time, we can figure out what features of the context are contributing to the internal experience. So the way that we collect this data at Changeist is through mobile surveys that we send to all of our youth during the program day through text message. There is also an option for paper diaries. We have not found too much success with that, unfortunately, but I know that in other spaces this works really well. So Each of our youth participants are surveyed at several random points across the day when they're at Changeist. So maybe one week they'll get a text at 9 a.m. and then at 2 p.m. Another week they'll get it at 1 o'clock and 10:30, right? And the idea is that because we're randomizing the time at which each young person responds, we get data that presents a whole picture of the day. So instead of having to just survey people over and over about every activity, you're kind of spreading it out so that a subgroup is giving you information about each activity within the program day. Why this works really, really well for us at Changeist is that we have a lot of moving pieces in our program. So I spoke a little bit about the type of work that we do, but it's very focused on experiential learning and service, right? So our youth are learning about social justice and social change making as they go out into the world and do activist activities. That means that often our curriculum is outsourced because we partner with other organizations that are experts in that particular social issue. So, for example, if we have a team of, say, 10 teenagers who are really passionate about solving the issue of homelessness in their community, maybe one week they will do work at a downtown women's shelter and learn about that experience and perspective. Another week, midnight mission and some like learn the differences between those different approaches to supporting homeless people. And then another week, they'll go learn about anti-gentrification organizing and tenants' rights, right? And so with our program, the idea is that people get a little bit of experience in all the different ways people are trying to create change, which is a fantastic approach in our perspective to civic engagement and empowerment. But it makes it really complicated for us because we don't always know what's going on at each of those partners, right? So our teams are constantly traveling, constantly visiting different spaces, and this was a really great tool for us to be able to see what's going on at those different hosts. You can see an example here. This is what the text looks like. Our Changeist will respond to both questions about what they're experiencing internally and then what they're doing. So the experience variables that we have chosen are really focused on youth empowerment and the way that they're learning social change skills. This is really where you would get creative, right? If you wanted to apply this method to your own programming. The context variables for us look like what location or partner site they're at, which group they're with, the program and role, right? So we want to be able to disaggregate our data by middle school and high school. Is it one of our Changeists in their first year, in their second year, more advanced track with us, et cetera. And then we're able to look at, okay, how does meaning and skill development, for example, change across these different contextual variables? So the types of questions that you can answer with this data tend to be process focused in nature, right? So one of the really great things about collecting data like this is it provides an opportunity to continually adapt what you're doing within the program space, as opposed to waiting for an end of year survey and then scrambling to use that information to apply it for the next year, right? Our feedback loop is much quicker. It's really great for just this continuous quality improvement mentality and spaces that are maybe developing a new program or have the capacity to improve the work that they're doing regularly. So what you can see here is a dashboard that is accessible by every single one of our Changeist community members. This is just a screenshot of it. In reality, this is a live dashboard that people can kind of disaggregate and learn what's going on. As you can see, we have all different activities, all different locations, and then we look at these different internal experiences based on the different activities and locations. We also collect, as I mentioned, qualitative data. So if one of our youth says, I'm learning so much right now, they'll be prompted to tell us, well, what are you learning? Let's, or if they're having a really fun time, what is it that is making this day so awesome? This is probably the most fun part of our data to dig into. Sometimes we get some really great gems in there. Sometimes it's silly things like, I learned that strawberry cake is Phoenix Bakery's oldest and most successful pastry. It's still helpful information though. We also track our program experience over time. And so if you look to the left side of the screen, that's what that graph is showing us. And that helps us to understand, as we're going along this journey of social change work, what are the pieces of the curriculum that are harder, and what are the ones that people enjoy more, etc. This is a lot of data, right? This is a lot going on. And as I talked about early on, we really, really want everyone in our program space to feel empowered to use this in a productive way. So what we do is we work with all of our line staff to collectively analyze what's happening. On the right, we have kind of like a coloring book page. We're a youth program, we like to make things fun. That page on the right side is actually a huge poster laminated that we have up in the office. And we use the protocol, excuse me, I might have said that wrong. On the right, the protocol's on the right side, program review is on the left side. We use the protocol on the right side to go through the dashboard together and write down some of what we've learned, right? We keep this sheet up for 2 to 3 weeks and continually add to it over time, right? So everyone in our space has the freedom to go up to this paper and write down what they think, what they'd like to see, and what kind of action items they need the team to work on in order to create a better space for our youth. So I mentioned some of the benefits of this method earlier. We get really rapid program feedback that helps us, especially to adapt what partnerships we're using. But we also get to understand the nuanced effects of some of these distinct program features, right? So we're working with so many different people that are all bringing something different to the table for these youth experiences. And we get to choose which partners we work with again, what kind of activities we need more of in the space in order to create balance, or maybe more free time, maybe more skill development pieces, right? But really what this is doing is highlighting youth agency in interacting with our program. And I will say, when we roll out this data collection method to our youth at the beginning of the year, we let them know 100,000%, this space is yours. You own it. We are here for you, and you get to make it exactly whatever you want, right? And so this is one of the tools that we use in order to allow our youth to continuously change the program and adapt it exactly how they want to. I'll also say that ESM is really accessible and appropriate when we have a bunch of teenagers who are always on their phone all the time, right? They like getting our texts and telling us what they think, it feels very relevant, I think, to this generation. So I talked about how we have so many contextual variables. That's really one of the big reasons that this method has been so helpful for us. Additionally, our organization has a youth-focused culture. We really want data in order to support continuous quality improvement, rather than just being able to say, we're great, and pat ourselves on the back, right? I'll say you also really have to know what variables constitute success for your program in order for something like this to work. And we use this in conjunction with other methods as well. So this is just one of the tools that we have in our toolbox. Of course, if you're going to text the surveys, you have to have smartphones with access to internet access. So that's one big caveat there.
Manage
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but we got about 10 minutes left. We'll make sure that we leave time for Q&A if needed, but just an FYI.
Perfect. Yes, I am right at the end. So I will just say some of the challenges are that it can be costly to invest in the time to regularly use the data, and you need a lot of responses, right, in order for this to be useful. Answering more complicated questions requires more complicated data analysis. But for us at Changeist, it's really been helpful. I have a few examples here of some of the ways that youth have adapted our program based on the feedback that they gave us. But that's sort of it. I'd love to jump into questions now. Do we have any in the Q&A box thing?
Let's see. I am not seeing any in there, unfortunately. Maybe not the worst thing, right? Maybe this is a great job of presentation, right?
Thank you.
So,
well,
I guess I do have a question for my own interest, right?
Yeah.
In terms of collecting data, it's like, what are you using in order to kind of visualize and share among the team members at Changeist? Like, how do you guys actually help make use of that in a visual format to kind of enact any change with the programming to ensure
That is a great question. We are actually currently using Google Data Studio, which I believe is one of their newer tools. And it doesn't have the same functionality as a lot of the other data dashboard programs, but we had used some other technology before, but just found that it wasn't as accessible to everyone that we wanted to be able to see it, right? Because we want to be really transparent with our data use, excuse me, anyone should be able to see this information, any stakeholder within our space. And so for us, it was easiest to just integrate it into, we were already using Google Suite. I will say, I feel some type of way about Google's data policies, right? And particularly some of the ways historically that they have used people's data before. But in the situation, we decided to kind of weigh the pros and cons and said, you know what, it's better that everyone can see what's happening.
And Manijay, we have a question here. So Reyes asks, how does this project align with the partner organization's mission? How is this incorporated in their daily operations? Any input from parents of the youth participating in the survey?
Yes, all very good questions. Unfortunately, we have not been able to engage parent feedback yet. It is one of the things that we're definitely looking toward integrating in the future. I will say that often parent feedback is kind of held to a higher standard than youth feedback, right? So a lot of schools and programs will just ask parents, what is the change that you see in your child? And kind of ignore the young person themselves. And so we made a strategic decision to really in the first few years center on collecting information from youth themselves, and just trusting that what they say is true and it holds value in and of itself. However, we are definitely trying to engage parents and community members more, particularly now that we have transitioned to a fully virtual program. And so we're trying to figure out exactly what that could look like. In terms of our partner organizations, so we have not found a great way to provide feedback to our partner organizations from this data yet. And I will say it's because we can be worried about their culture around data use and whether or not they will take the information in the same way that we view it, right? I think our worst fear is giving someone data that they're not happy with, and then an organization using that to, have some kind of punitive effect with their own staff or what's going on. So we've tried having conversations, especially there have been instances where our youth have had negative experiences with a partner organization, and we've had to kind of cut ties with them. And in those cases, we'll have very honest conversations about exactly what happened and kind of why we're going in a different direction. But in terms of alignment of mission, I will say that our idea at Changeist is to create a pipeline of social change makers. And so what that means is often they are working with our youth in kind of a shorter term period throughout the program year, but our youth who really connect with their mission, we funnel them into that organization next, right? So once they've graduated out of Changeist, it's like, I spoke earlier about the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. We have some youth that are now organizers with that organization specifically. So that's kind of where the partnership lies.
Great. Navina, are there any other questions that you pulled from the Q&A that you might be able to share, or?
No, there are no more questions.
All right. Well, that's not a problem at all. If I feel like I'm the person that I need to kind of sit and stew on information for a while before my questions come up. So, you can reach out to me through the conference portal. My email address is manage@changeist.org, or if you just go to changeist.org, you can find me on there because it's tough to spell my name sometimes. But I would love to connect with anyone who is doing similar work with young folks, or even thinking about data use in a different perspective that is still aligned with the goal of empowering young people. So please do reach out if there's anything else that comes up for folks.
Awesome. Much appreciated, Manager. We definitely appreciate the time you've taken to discuss everything with Changes and what you guys are trying to do in the LA area. Think we got comments rolling in again saying, thanks, great program, thanks for the response. Thank you so much. Again, great talk. Love what your team is doing, right? So we can't thank you enough. I think we are at the end of our time period, right? So again, thank you for being able to be a part of DataCon LA 2020 amidst COVID-19. We still made the dream work, and we will continue to do this on. So
thanks, Manijay.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good rest of the conference, and I'll see some of you in other sessions.
Sounds great, Manager.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone take care.
Bye.